In episode 14 of So Say We Travel the podcast, we will discuss the not-so-glamorous side of RV life, including privacy, or the lack thereof, never-ending repairs, and the infamous black tank.
Despite all the things that we talk about today, it's important to know that we truly believe that for every con, there are 5 pros, and we wouldn't trade this lifestyle for anything.
Welcome aboard to So Say We Travel. Hi, I'm Sean.
Hi, I'm Charlie.
And we are So Say We Travel. And this will be episode 14 of our podcast. And I'd like to start off every single episode by kind of talking about why we got into doing these in the first place. Personally, for me, I believe that experience is interchangeable with
knowledge.
And so hopefully by sharing our experience with you, we're going to share some knowledge with you of our journey from going from sticks and bricks to full-time RV life. And then also our experiences being new full-time RVers and kind of that journey, what that's been like. There's lots of different things you could do with this information. You either could see, I definitely want to do that. Or you could be, I definitely don't want to do that. And that's the goal. We're hoping to share our experiences and our knowledge with you. And hopefully you will commensurate with us, learn from our mistakes, celebrate our victories, all sorts of things. And again, also one of the big things we want to do is establish a community. Right? We want to introduce dialogue, start conversations. We are more than willing and would love for you to share your experiences and your knowledge with us. Hopefully make our lives out here on the road a little bit easier, a little bit more streamlined. But again, just know that you've got another fellow full-timer out there to commensurate with, to celebrate your triumphs and encourage you through the trials. 2 weeks has gone by since our last episode, and we've had quite a few great things happen. But we're going to mention two in particular for our update this time. As we said last time that we were finally getting back to somewhat of a travel schedule. And one of the first trips that we had booked was to, not too far from here, but a little quiet town in Llano, Texas. To spend some time with some really good friends of ours, some dear friends. Vincent Van Gostagram, Matt and Tina. They had celebrated their wedding. They went in and tied the knot. I had the honor and the privilege to be a part of the wedding. It was absolutely beautiful. It was. Beautiful ceremony. They seeing the family come together, the two different families come together.
Weddings are always good, a good experience because you're right. It's bringing two families that come together. So, I mean, weddings are always... and then always a good time.
And then they were really such good friends of ours. We camped with them on multiple occasions. I went to University of Texas at Austin with Matt. We kind of commiserated in that experience together. We've both been teachers for the past 7 years. So we were really, really close. And then I love to see good things happen to good people. And they are good people and they're good for each other. And then being able to tie the knot was absolutely phenomenal. So congratulations to Matt and Tina. We wish them all the best in many, many wonderful years together. But
and hopefully be travel buddies with them too. They have their van, but they also bought a trailer now too. And so they're going to pull the trailer with the van and start doing a little bit more traveling. So hopefully we can do some traveling together.
So Vinny was pretty self-sustained as it was. Vinny's their van, and they let us do a tour of Vinny in a previous episode. Go check it out. It's so cool. Or go check out the images on @Vincent Van Gostagram. You can see kind of their work and how they converted Vinny from this rundown.
I think it was a painter's van, and they renovated it into a living space.
It's absolutely cool, and he's kind of tricked it out. It's absolutely beautiful ride. So if you're interested in that, go check it out. But also, he was their self-sustained, but they added a trailer onto it. It's a 350 passenger van. They can tow a trailer with no issues.
And I think it's a little small one too. I think they said it was like 15 or 16 feet,
so I'm really, really happy to do some camping with them and traveling with them. But we did travel to Llano.
We took everything to Llano.
So we mentioned this before, especially when we went to Kerrville. It was our first trip as full-time RVers. And it was just a remarkably different experience when you don't have to pack a bag. You just hook up your home, you take it to a location, everything you need is there. And this was no different. But that was a beautiful thing. It was awesome. It was really great. Kind of why we got into this lifestyle anyway. Get to experience again was really, really great. But we ended up at a very, very beautiful spot. Where did we go?
We stayed at Riverway RV Park in Llano. And it's right on the river. One of the features of Llano is the river. So they we didn't ask for the spot, but we actually got a spot like right in front of the river. So that was a nice little surprise. So it was right there on the river. So it was really cool. We were parked there for 2 days. And so we stayed there. We went to the wedding one day, and then the next day we did like some stuff around Llano. So it's a cute little town. I mean, there's not a whole lot to do, but it's a little small town. But it was a lot of fun, and the RV park that we stayed at was pretty nice.
I was blown away by the amenities.
It did have so many amenities and it was really inexpensive too. I mean, granted, it's way out of the way, right? It's not near any major highways or anything like that because it's a small town. But they had like a little clubhouse that had puzzles and games. There was an entire kitchen in there. And then you had farm fresh eggs. I'm assuming the people that own the park are right next to it because I saw like a little farm over there. So I'm pretty sure that they own the RV park. So they have eggs, and it's on an honor system, which you don't see very much these days. Cool.
So cool.
You just put your money in the little box and you take the eggs, and they ask that you just return the egg cartons if you have them. What else was there? There was a playground, and then there was a nice little swing set that was right in front of the river. Like Maddie would go down there and swing on the swings and like look over the river.
They had a little path, a little trail that went down by the river. Wasn't anything too established, but it was really nice. It had big trees, lots of shade. And like you said, we didn't ask for the spot being right on the water, and then the way that the sun kind of just goes across the park, all of the shade was in front of the Galactica.
Oh yeah.
So the front side was always shaded. We just set up our chairs right in front. Perfect view.
Sat out there pretty much all day.
It was
and
so
we were in shade
wonderful
the whole time.
Yeah, so wonderful. Then a storm did come through that night, but all of the spots had nice gravel down. They had nice concrete slides to let you know where where you're supposed to park the vehicle. They had kind of semi-paved gravel areas for you to park your car, but then a little nice grass patches. Some had like a concrete slab patio. Others didn't. Ours didn't, but we really didn't need it. It is really, really nice. Very, very well kept RV park. And again, it's out of the way, inexpensive with tons of amenities. And it was just really, really great. We had some deer kind of came through both mornings. They were just walking along.
Yeah, because it's the RV park, and then there's like this bank, and then there's the river. So on the bank right there, the deer would come up every morning. I'm pretty sure somebody threw out some corn. That's why they were so close the day we were packing up leaving, because somebody had thrown some corn out there. So they were coming up, and I mean, they were a little shy, but I mean, we were outside like walking around, and they were still like not, running off. So it was really cool. Yeah.
And the neighbors to the left and right, we pulled in and automatically just very, very neighborly. I'm assuming they're kind of full time. They don't, they could be there for months but that they had been there a lot longer than we have, and they were just so welcoming. It wasn't like these strangers, so good. Just why you do this. Why you do this. It was just perfectly encapsulated in a 2 to 3 day trip. It was so great. But it was a lot more enjoyable because it wasn't as hot. We finally gotten a break in the heat here. We got some storms, a cold front blows through, and we're looking at some 70-degree days.
It's very nice.
Yes, we are actually recording this podcast.
It's the middle of the day.
It's like 1:00, and this was not be possible at all 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, so it's definitely nice to have a temperature change. For sure.
So that weekend was absolutely beautiful. The weekends have been beautiful since then. Get to get outside, literally spending the entire day outside. And that is why we kind of got into this. This is around the same time that we actually started doing the thing last year. And so we was like, man, we got to deal with Texas weather before we can get on the road and go to places where it's like this all the time. And so it's finally good to be back in where we started and enjoying the full deal of Galactica and camping and full-time RV life like we were when we first got it. But just mentioning the weather alone, you see there is a duality to this. There's really, really great days like right now. And then there's really, really hot days or really, really stormy days. Huge things you have to consider. There's a flip side to a lot of the things that you experience with this life. There's pros and there's cons. And that's really what we want to talk about today. And like Charlie mentioned in the intro, this is in no way whatsoever to deter anyone to say that we have regrets. I know you've seen it quite a bit in the social media groups.
I have. And that's one of the reasons we want to talk about it today too. Just because people will get into this lifestyle not knowing all the stuff that comes along with it. And so they immediately regret it. And they've sold their house, like they sold everything, and they're like moving into this thing for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
and then they spend a few months in it and they're like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
You know? So we're just putting information out there so that you get the full spectrum of it. You know, we glamorize it a lot. You know, in every single podcast we talk about how awesome
Mm-hmm.
everything is. And it truly is awesome. But there are some cons, and those are important things to consider if you're, you know, considering this lifestyle.
Definitely. And in our first episodes, we talked about it quite a bit. We haven't mentioned it as much lately, but this pursuit of minimalism,
Mm-hmm.
it's all about balancing comfort and freedom.
Right.
Right. And with the freedom that you get with this
Mhm.
lifestyle, you sacrifice a lot in comfort.
Right.
And that's a lot where the cons come in.
Mm-hmm.
And so people don't realize that, you know, they're in the honeymoon phase.
Right.
And they ignore all those discomforts,
Mhm.
or they haven't been presented with a situation that
Mhm.
pushes them into that area of being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But the more time you spend in it, you will experience those, it's
Yes.
going to happen.
It will.
It's
Mhm.
going to happen. And so then more and more those discomforts are made apparent, and they didn't consider it
Mhm.
beforehand, there's regret,
right.
there's tension,
Yeah.
there's,
Or maybe they did
resentment.
consider it, but didn't really think about it.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like put all the thought into it.
Yeah. Or just didn't hear it.
Right.
Right. So that's kind of the point why we're doing this, is
Mhm.
like, hopefully someone will hear us and will hear our experience, hopefully hear our knowledge, and be like, that's something I didn't consider before.
Right.
You know, this is something I need to think about
Right.
when making this decision, or just I can plan for it.
Mhm.
This could potentially happen, you know, like I could mentally prepare myself
Mhm.
for it. So that was a pretty long intro to just say that we're going to be covering pros and cons, and share kind of the difficulties,
Mhm.
the realities. That's really how I want to put it.
Realities, yeah.
Difficulty is a reality in every aspect of life, and full-time RVing is no exception.
Right.
So the first one we're going to talk about is, again, we went from 2,500 square feet house
Right.
to 250 square feet RV.
Yes.
The walls are paper thin.
Mhm.
The space is extremely tight.
Mhm.
Pretty much every space is a shared space
Yeah.
in one way, shape, or form, except for Peyton's bunk.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, it's kind of shared because you just have to share it close.
Yeah,
Like
and
the
yeah.
space for clothes
And there's
stuff, so-
a pretty much only dividing is a curtain. There's no
Right.
door, right?
Right.
And even if there was a door, it would still be paper thin to
Mhm.
where volume things are kind of invading the space, right?
Yeah.
So there is very little privacy.
Yes.
That's just something you have to take into account when you
Mhm.
go. There's just not enough space to go anywhere to do anything private.
Yes.
Some people, that's an issue.
Mhm.
If that's an issue for you, that is something you should really consider, because that is I would say the most invasive
Mhm.
thing of all things we're going to talk about today. The most invasive thing that could possibly affect you on a personal level, that could be a deal breaker,
Yeah.
is that just know that when you move into these smaller spaces, these shared spaces, you have very little to no privacy.
Yes.
There is a bathroom, but again, the walls are paper thin.
Mhm.
It's not that much space. You can't spend time in there and be comfortable. You're not going
Right.
to want to stay in there and be comfortable.
Right.
But again, the walls are paper thin. So when you're doing things in there, you can hear
Mhm.
everything
Yeah.
if you're anywhere nearby.
And again, it's shared too, so you can't spend a lot of time in there because
Very good point.
everybody needs to be in there at some point.
Very good point. You have
Especially in
to
the mornings when you guys are getting ready
Mhm.
for work and for school and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So you have to consider that as well.
You have to be efficient in there with your
Mhm.
time. You have to be efficient with the water. You have to be efficient with how you use that. You know, all these things. Like
Yeah.
I said, and it's simply because you're in such close proximity with
Right.
everyone else.
Mhm.
It's a shared space, very little privacy.
Mhm.
Don't want to be presenting problems without presenting solutions. We mentioned this in one of our previous episodes. Is Peyton wants to do her makeup. Takes her a lot longer to do it than it takes you to do yours.
Yeah.
So what we did is we got her a little
Mirror. Mhm.
vanity mirror to put inside
Yeah,
of her
so
bunk.
she has her little setup when she can get ready in the mornings
Mhm.
and stuff like that.
So this seems like a no-brainer, but again, if you didn't consider, it was a pretty straightforward solution to a pretty big problem that we had. So just putting that out there.
Yeah, and we make do. I mean, it's fine. You know, we have one bathroom. I know some RVs have you have two bathrooms in them. And if that's something really important to you, then that's something to consider. But it wasn't that important to us.
Mhm.
So just the one bathroom is fine. It works. And there's bathhouses down the road. You know, we can walk down there if we really need to. So-
Yes, exactly. And so then with the fact that it's, again, a shared space, alone time
Yes.
is really hard to come by.
Mm-hmm.
Alone time, individually alone time,
Yes.
and alone time for us separate from the children.
Yes.
Some people, that is a big deal.
Yes.
The alone time, individual alone
Mhm.
time, like they need that space. I mentioned this in the last episode where
Mhm.
people ask me, what do you do when you want to get away from everybody? I say, well, we don't
We
feel
just
that.
don't. Yeah.
We don't feel that need. So that's
Right.
not an issue for us. But I could see where it could be an issue for
Mhm.
people. This could potentially be a deal breaker.
Oh yeah, I've heard other people mention that, like they need it to get away from their spouse or significant other for whatever time frame that they need.
Mhm.
And so yeah, that can be an issue because there is nowhere. I mean, granted, you could be inside, one could be outside.
Mhm.
You know, that is a way to kind of overcome that, but there is no like separate space to go to.
Yep. And we're going to talk about that actually in another kind of reality later, is the
Mhm.
weather dictates everything.
Yeah. it
So
does.
if it's raining outside,
Mhm.
you
There's nowhere to go.
need that you like you
Mhm.
got to figure it out.
Yeah.
You will have to deal with the fact that you can't go
Yes.
anywhere.
Yes.
But then alone time. You know,
Right.
we are a couple. You know,
Mhm.
we are a romantic couple. You
Mhm.
know, we are very, very passionate and love one another, and all of that implies. But we have kids, you know,
Mhm.
and just like finding that alone time. We've been really strategic with how we
Yes.
scheduled Maddie's co-op days and
Your
the
off
days that
time.
I'm taking off this year. So it's kind of building in that time to kind
Mhm.
of be alone. And then
Yes.
as moving forward, when we go on the road again, we had a tent when we went from sticks and bricks to moving into the RV.
Mhm.
I did not get rid of that. You know, at some point, like we're going to be like, okay, we're kicking kids out of the RV. You know, we're kicking kids out of the RV.
Or we can go in the tent.
Or we can go on the tent. Like, you know, it's like planning for that,
Yes.
you know, and making sure that we are being intentional about maintaining that alone time. It's very, very important to you.
It is.
If you feel that having to work to make that happen
Mhm.
is a stressor,
Yes.
puts strain on your relationship, then that's something to consider.
Yeah.
It's
is.
not going to come easy. You're going to have
Mhm.
to be intentional. You have to design the time. You have to plan the time.
Mhm.
You have to facilitate the time to be alone
Yes.
in the RV.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, you have to like your significant other. You have to like your spouse. This isn't a way to fix your marriage or anything like that. And I have seen people suggest that, like,
Mhm.
oh, let's do this so that, you know, we can become closer as a couple. And no, I don't recommend that at all. You need to already have that closeness. You need to already be in that what's the word? You need to already have that kind of relationship.
Mindset.
Your mindset, exactly, with your significant other, because there's added strain and stress and everything to this lifestyle, which we're going to talk about a little bit more later in the video. So I don't think it's a good idea if you think doing this is a way to fix a marriage, because I think it'll just add to it.
Certainly. And it's not, it's mindset.
Yes,
what you said.
it is.
It's moving into the RV is not the solution.
Right.
However, the mindset that you have to make a relationship happen in here
Mhm.
will certainly help you build a stronger relationship.
Yes.
You know, like
Mhm.
when you can't escape.
Right.
You know, I can't get away.
Mhm.
So when there's something that's kind of an issue,
Yeah.
if it's, first of all, you get really, really good at discerning what is worth arguing about
Right.
and what isn't.
Mhm.
Honestly, like sometimes we argue just to argue. People argue just to argue.
Right.
You know, like they want to lash out, they want to vent, they want to get that out of there. Like, I get that, you know, but when getting hooked up and leaving at a certain time, staying on a deadline, being in the, you know, making sure that this machine of living in this RV works, sometimes you got to be like, is this really something that I'm upset about? Is this worth fighting over?
Right.
And that's a mindset, I
It
think,
is,
when you're
yeah.
like, nope, it's not worth it.
Right.
It's not worth it. You know, like, because it will throw just a wrench in the kink and everything that makes this thing go. And so that's something that will definitely make you a better relationship, a stronger relationship. So I'm not saying that this living in the RV will not fix your relationship, but the things and the mindset and the behaviors that you have to develop in order, the communication, things like that will make your relationship stronger.
Yes.
That was a little bit of a rant, but again, realities with privacy and the closeness, something you need to consider.
Yes.
Then we're going to go ahead and just talk about the big
the biggest one.
the big elephant in the room. We're going to just jump right into this because this is, again, I'm going with deal breakers. Things that, like, if you're like, no, I can't vibe with that,
Right.
this is not a life for you,
Yes.
right? It's a reality.
Mhm.
Closeness is a reality. The black tank is a reality.
Yes.
There's no other way around it. You are dealing with waste. You're dealing with your waste. And you have to be
Not
responsible.
only yours, but your entire family.
Your family, yeah.
Your
You
entire
gotta-
family.
You got to be responsible.
Right.
And I've heard horror stories, and this, I would love to be a camp host. That idea sounds so cool to me, but I've heard horror stories from camp hosts saying just people are so inconsiderate and so irresponsible with this thing that is extremely, extremely deadly, like potentially deadly,
right? And
just disgusting. And you know, like if you don't handle it properly, irresponsible with it, it can have really dire consequences. Yeah. So it is a big responsibility. Yeah. It is a reality of living in the RV, and you just have to be responsible, and you can have all the equipment, the bells and whistles. Really, not that it makes things easier, but it is the most responsible and safest way to handle it. Having the right hookups, having the right hoses, elbows, flushes.
Yes, I definitely recommend doing the research and figuring out what works.
Yes.
And because people will come into it and just be like, oh, they just go and then they empty it and that's it. Well, no, it's not that simple. You know, you do have to have treatments and stuff in it. You do have to have the right hoses and stuff like that. So definitely do your research to figure out, you know, how to take care of this tank, because if you don't, it could be a huge problem. And
that's really the kind of it is a reality. And if you have all the ducks in the row, everything works great until it doesn't. And that's kind of the reality, right? So the reality side of it, because there could be time, like we went almost a year and some change, like using everything properly before we ever encountered any issues with the emptying, dumping, the black tank issue. And it wasn't even a me thing. It's just in Llano, when I put the elbow in, I normally screw it in and it comes out just fine. But when we're in Llano, when I go to take the elbow off, the whole sewer hookup thing was turning and I couldn't get my elbow out of there. And so me not wanting to give up the elbow, and really I just didn't want to inconvenience the campsite or anybody coming after me. My first thought could have been I'll just leave it. Don't want to deal with it because I don't want to touch it. Ew, I don't want to touch it, right? Yeah. But I was like, no, I don't want to I want to keep my elbow. I don't want to inconvenience the campsite. I also don't inconvenience anyone coming after me. I'm going to try and deal with this. And so me, in the process of dealing with it, things got a little gross. Yeah. You know, like, that's just a reality of it. I was like, I mean, like, you wash your hands, put some hand sanitizer, and cross fingers that you didn't get anything crazy, right? That, like, if that is something that you're like, no, I do not ever want to be put in that position. That's not for me. Again, that is a reality, something to consider that you will have to deal with. And you have a point in particular that you want to mention with this.
Oh, well, I think that everybody should know how to empty the black tank. I don't think that it's right that to all the responsibility to fall on, you. And I think the reason you did it for like a year or something, right? Just because you just took care of everything on the outside.
Yeah, that's pretty much how we did it. Yeah, exactly.
And I took care of everything on the inside. But what happened is you were actually at work one day and the gray tank was overflowing into the tub. And I was like, oh, I got to empty these. So I was just like, well, I'll just go do it, and I kind of already knew how to do it, but I had never actually done it because you had done everything. So I just went out there and did it. So my point is, like, everybody should know how to empty the tanks. Because if you're, or anybody in this situation, if the person who usually does it is not there and the tanks need to be emptied, then you should know how to do it. Just learn how to do it. I just recommend that for ladies, learn how to do it. Just do it. It's important to know. Because again, if it's overflowing or something like that, it needs to be emptied. And then again, I don't think that the responsibility should all fall on you. So just figuring out how to do it is important, in my opinion.
And actually, and it's not like we had like it's a man's job or anything like that. The way that we really broke it up is like when we were breaking things down, just kind of the habit that we got into when we first started is I was out there packing up the campsite, all the outside stuff I was taking care of, and with that was unhooking and dumping and everything. It's not like I was like, well, that's a man's job, I need to do it, and you were like, that's a man's job, I don't have to do it. It was just, that's kind of the way it worked out. It could have very well been the other way around, it's when she's inside though, she's dealing with packing away the kitchen, and she cooks, so where she wants everything, that's, she has priority, so it kind of just happened that way. But you brought up a very good point. Just, that was kind of the one thing that I was really, really worried about. And I watched multiple videos from a bunch of different people to kind of just figure out what's the best way to do this. And you really don't know how to do it until you do it.
Yes. One of the things is the sensors, they don't work. I don't know what it is. I don't know why, but I mean, we've had it. They worked for a little while, but I think up until recently, I guess when we started using it, more often, the sensors don't work anymore. They always say the tanks are full. Always. We can empty them and it says the tanks are full. So don't rely on the sensors ever. Just know your tanks. Know how big your tanks are, how many gallons you can fit in your tank, and then just know your regular usage. I just recommend that to the fullest, especially if you're living in it full time. If you're part time, it's not much of an issue, but if you're full time, just know your water usage and know how much usage that you're putting into it, and just know your tanks. That way you know when they need to be emptied. And then for the black tank especially, it's important to use the right chemicals in it so that everything's breaking up, and you don't want what's called a tower.
We'll cover that in another video.
In the tank.
You're trying to
So you just don't want those things to happen. So it's just important to know all of the stuff that you need to make it work and make it function.
That was a little bit of a rant as well, but every single word of it is true. And it is a reality of living in this thing. It is the other side of the coin, right? If you are going to the freedom to take and have a bathroom with you wherever you go, you're going to have to deal with everything that is a product of that bathroom. So that's the other side of it. With that freedom, that discomfort or that responsibility, right? So just a reality consider with the black tank. And again, the reason we covered, again, the privacy and the black tank, because I know some people, they're just like, nope, those are deal breakers. Like I cannot.
Right.
You know, so just want to put that out there out front first and foremost. This one is kind of a big deal, but not really a deal breaker, because you don't have to do it. You could always, which will actually lead into another one of our realities to consider. You could always have someone else do it for you. Right. And that's constantly repairing and fixing something. We mentioned it in another episode about how that's why the warranty programs for these RVs are so robust, is because they can't actually take these out and do the quality control testing and fixing and fixing all the bugs, working out all the kinks, repairing all the stuff, right? They can't drive it for X amount of miles and then fix the problem before they sell it to you. Right. So pretty much all of the quality control is happening in the first year that you have it. Right. You get that thing on the road, starts shaking around, all the stuff starts moving and wiggling, right? From it rolled off the factory, you hooked it up, took it on the road. The first time stuff starts happening, you are going to be the one to deal with it. Yep. Again, depending on what you buy, something to consider is that we found out when we were shopping is if you have the wood frames with the aluminum siding, there's much more pieces involved to putting it together. Right. And our salesman told us that depending on what you're doing, that may not be a problem. If you're just taking out on weekend trips, you're going back and forth to the lake and back, you're not driving it that much. Right. It will last you a pretty long time because it's not shaking as much. If you're full-timing in one of those and you're always on the road and always going, it's going to be falling apart pretty quickly, pretty regularly, because it's just much more pieces involved, which is why we went with the Galactica, where it's the fiberglass and wood, where there's less pieces put together, and so there's less things shaking, right, and less things falling apart, so it lasts a lot longer when you're full-timing on the road. So something to consider. You need to be handy. Yes, you need. I how many things I've repaired so many things already just in the first year. We've had to pay someone to repair something for us in the first year. Right. Pretty big deal. We didn't winterize properly. We had a crack in our water heater tank. This will be another reality that we'll talk about later, where we had to pay a good bit of money to get that fixed because we wanted hot water. It's important, especially when you're in colder climates, things like that. So that just the maintenance of it. Again, if you have a unlimited budget and you can always hire someone to come out and fix it for you, great. But you're not always going to be in a space where someone is mobile and come and fix it for you. You have to take it into an RV park, and with the boom right now, we're looking at easily months turnaround on. You have to take it in, they have to fix it, drop it off, things like that.
And then you have to find somewhere to go, right? Because if you're living in this full time and you drop it off for repairs, you have to worry about hotel costs and things like that. So being really handy or using YouTube, looking out there and looking at repairs, things people have done. A lot of times the same stuff happens to a lot of different rigs. So you can find videos out there, and if you can follow instructions via YouTube video, you can fix it yourself. Again, a huge mindset, again, we're going to come back to, just because things are going to happen. You could have a really bad thing happen, something really major, something could happen while you're on the road. And so you just have to have that mindset that stuff could happen.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and so fighting and arguing, you know, with your significant other is not going to make it any better. So you just again, you have to have the mindset of things could happen, and figure it out together. You know, how you're going to make it better, how we're going to fix this. Because again, adding stress and strain is not a good thing in a relationship. So
and mindset, exactly like what you said. And again, realities. This is why we're doing this. We're telling you things will break.
Yes.
Things will happen. So if you're going out there like you are hoping for the best, but planning for the worst, right? You offset a lot of things because you make sure like we ran into the issue. We're doing the tires. The jack that we had was not the right one.
Right.
So we had to learn the hard way that you want to get a piston jack as opposed to a regular rolling wheel jack. Right. So if I had a plan beforehand,
you don't want to find that out when you're on the road.
Exactly. So just knowing that things will happen and doing your best to plan for the worst, hoping for the best, but planning for the worst makes the world of a difference.
Yes.
If you're the type of person you're like, I don't want to have to worry about fixing stuff, fixing my house all the time. That's another thing too.
Right.
It's your home. Wherever you're at, when things go wrong with this thing, things are going wrong with your home.
Yeah. And so the smallest break too can be a huge, you know, inconvenience or something. One of the doors on our bedroom had come off one time. And I kind of dealt with it for a little while, but after a while it was like hanging like pretty bad. You know, and so that can be a huge major inconvenience if you can't close our bedroom door, you know? So you have to be able to fix those things, because again, it can be really inconvenient.
So those are the big, So those are the big things. Just know that you're gonna have to maintain. Well, you don't have to, but it would make your life significantly easier,
right?
Less expensive if you were able to be handy. So
those RV repairmen are not cheap either.
They're not. No.
So you don't want to rely on them.
No.
Exclusively. A lot of them charge per mile to come out. And so if you're not near one and they have to drive, you know, like an hour or something to get to you, it's going to be really expensive. Not only that, but the repair costs on top of that too.
So those are major maintenance things. There's also little maintenance things that you have to deal with on a regular basis because it's so small.
Right.
So a house, right, would take a long time for the dust to build up to a place where you're like, I got to do something about this.
Yeah.
When you're in 250 square feet, it doesn't take long at all for dust to build up, for dirt to build up, and then you're in and out, literally outside.
Yeah. Especially if you have dogs and kids too. I mean, all that stuff just comes in, so you're constantly cleaning it. You're always going to be cleaning it. I clean it every single day. I do like deep cleans at like once a week, but as far as like just everyday maintenance cleaning, it's every single day. We vacuum every day. Stuff comes in, and then like you said, the dust. You know, it settles inside the RV, so you're constantly cleaning as well. Yep.
So again, just not so serious of a reality, but it is a reality where you're constantly need to and you don't have to.
No, you don't. You don't have to.
Your quality of life will be significantly longer. Hey, guy. We have another guest today, apparently.
It's right there, too.
Yeah.
He was yelling at us.
Quality in your RV will last longer. Significantly longer if you stay up on the maintenance. You take care of it. And ideally, it'll take care of you.
Yes.
Another reality, again, is not that big of a deal. But again, so we're getting to less extreme realities, things to consider. Because this is something you have to deal with in a sticks and bricks as well. It just has way more impact on your day-to-day life and planning when you're living in an RV.
Yeah.
And that's the weather.
Yes.
Right? Somehow, some way, going outside is going to be part of your life. Spending significantly more time outside in an RV than you did in a sticks and bricks is going to be an aspect of your life now, like living in an RV.
Right.
So whether it's raining, whether it's snowing, or it's sleet, or it's extremely sunny, very hot and sunny, these are realities that you have to accept. The weather is going to impact your day-to-day life on a much more significant scale.
Yes. And we've talked about this a little bit too in our previous videos, but I mean, these things, they're not insulated like at all. And so during the summer, it's hot, you know, the AC is constantly on. You don't want to turn the oven on to cook because it's going to get even more hot in there. So you have to cook outdoors, or hopefully you can cook outdoors, because if it's raining, you have to figure out something else, you know? And then when it's cold outside, you know, you want to hopefully cook inside, but you know, cook outside too. And it's just
the weather matters.
It does.
And so there's that, and even on just the little nuance thing. Like, so I kind of talked to my coworkers about the summer and the heat, and I just mentioned, I was like, you acclimate. I got used to, I'm going to go outside for 10, 20 minutes to do X. I'm going to get sweaty.
Right.
I'm going to sweat.
Right.
And then I'm going to come back inside. I'm going to cool off. It's going to dry. And then I have to go back outside to do something else. I'm going to sweat again.
Yeah.
Right. So that some people who, depending on what your job is or what your life is, this may be something that you're like, it's no problem for me.
Yeah.
Like we pretty much, though, both of us worked indoors. We didn't do any, manual labor jobs. Like sweating regularly was not something that I did outside of working out, so, but if you're an RV, that is a factor of your life. Yeah. And granted, if you live in hotter climates, if you're, a nomad, which we hope to be eventually, and you're maintaining the 70, 80 degrees, that will no longer be an issue. Yeah. But if you're in place somewhere where you're dealing with the extreme weather patterns, that is a reality that you're going to have to deal with. Right. Extreme cold. Yeah. Winterizing your RV is going to have to be a thing. Like some don't have the insulated bottoms, so you have to find a way to keep your RV and pipes and everything warm. Yes. It'll affect your RVs way more than it affects your sticks and bricks home. Right. And you have to prep and plan for that.
And then another thing is bad weather, right? So you have to plan for bad weather. Yes. We're stationary right now, so a lot of the stuff we have is out kind of on the patio and stuff like that. So when bad weather comes, we have to pay attention to the weather. Like that's not something we can just put in the back of our mind. Like I have to pay attention to what every single day is going to be, because if there was a storm that came through a while back that we had to prepare for, so we had to put everything away. So we have to pack everything up, we have to put it away, we have to put it somewhere so it's not blowing around,
because those become hazards.
Yes,
if our thing flies and damages someone else's RV, we're liable.
Right.
Like those are things you have to consider. And you're like, well, I have to deal with that in my sticks and bricks. Yes, but times that by like 10.
Yes, because you're more time outdoors. A lot of your stuff is outside, so that stuff has to be taken out and put away. And we had wind. It was really high winds. We had like 50, 60 mile an hour winds, which can be really bad. It can be really dangerous. Our RV was moving around, and so that's something you have to consider too, because we were all trying to sleep. But I don't think we did actually that night because the winds were so bad. So the RV's moving and shaking and stuff like that. Again, that's just something you have to deal with. And then hopefully when we're nomads and moving around, we can pay attention to the weather and avoid these storms. Yes. Because you don't want to be caught like in a tornado, or anything like that. So that is something that you have to watch. You have to pay attention to. You have to prepare for bad weather. And
I'm very fortunate that that's Charlie's thing. I don't at all. I don't pay attention to the weather at all. I never have. I don't know. It's just whether it was a hot day, I was like, I still got to do what I got to do. So it didn't matter. If it was raining, I was like, I still got to do what I got to do. So again, but I was in sticks and bricks. Like I was okay with me getting wet. I was okay with me being in extreme heat. I was okay with me being cold because I know I can move me around. I'll be fine. But there's like your home and how it affects your home is a big deal. So that's really kind of the thing to remember too. It's, if you're on a route somewhere, if you're driving somewhere, you got to pay attention to what the winds will be like, where you're driving through. Yeah. If it's going to be rain, the water's going to be wet. Like these are, so just, if you're the type of person that you don't want to have to worry about things you can't control to that day-to-day minute of a kind of level, this is a reality that you will have to face when living in an RV.
Yeah. Like plans can change, if you want to be somewhere at a certain time, but the weather is going to be bad, then you have to account for that change. You have to be prepared, for a plan B. Yep. And some people can't function like
Semper
that.
Gumby. Yeah. Always flexible.
Yes, you have to be.
Yeah. So imagine you're planning your trip. Like we're going to stay at this RV park in Florida for 2 weeks before we head up to our next spot. You've already got a place booked for those next 2 weeks. You've already reserved, paid for it. Yeah. But all of a sudden a hurricane comes in from the coast. You're like, we got to get out of Florida. Your plans change. Yes. You got to be able to plan and adapt and move and things like that. So just another reality is the weather plays a much more significant role in your day-to-day life than what it would in the sticks and bricks. Yep. Another reality that we heard about, we knew about, but you really don't realize it until you're living it, is that this life can be pretty expensive.
It can, yes.
So one of the big things that we were trying to get, again, we've said it before in a previous episode, was at the least, once we learned and kind of it snapped for us about the whole minimalism thing, at the least we would have downsized our home because we were paying for so much house that we weren't using. Right. So we were like, well, we want to take all the money that we're putting into a home and putting it into experiences. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to move into our RV. The payments are significantly cheaper. It's a much smaller space, a lot less comfortable, but we have much more disposable income to go and do the things.
Right.
But then you get in it and you realize that a lot of the expenses that you had in your sticks and bricks, they just manifest themselves in different ways when you're living in an RV.
Right.
So it's not that it's not cheaper.
It can be.
It can be. And it requires, again, discipline.
Yes.
We've always been the type of people that we live inside of our means. We just don't always have to have the next new thing. I've never been that kind of person. I will wear a pair of shoes till they fall off my feet. I'll drive a truck or a car until the wheels fall off. Like if I own it, I don't have a payment. I love that. But then, you incur maintenance on an older vehicle, things like that. But we've never been kind of live outside of our means. And so as long as you know that, you are going to have to sacrifice certain comforts and certain things that you would normally spend a lot of money on to make this really inexpensive. You have to sacrifice quite a bit.
Yeah.
And again, you have to go into it in the right way. Again, some people, they have the opportunity, they build up enough equity in our homes. That's kind of what we did, is we had built up enough equities in our home. We bought low, we sold significantly higher, that we were able to eliminate a lot of our debt going into this life. And then we planned financially to maintain our income with less expenses so that we're able to save money and then have a big cushion for going on the road. And even on top of that, we made sure that we secured virtual jobs that would cover the costs of our expenses on the road, so that our finances did not take that big of a hit and we could transition financially pretty smoothly into this life.
Yes.
If you thought, I'm going to sell my house and go and buy an RV and then life will be much greater because I don't have a mortgage, you're probably in for a little bit of a rude awakening.
Yeah.
Because again, we paid a lot of money when we didn't winterize our water heater properly. That was a good bit of money.
Yeah.
We're paying money to fix things. You pay a good bit of money because your vehicle is pretty much how you get around.
Right.
Maintenance on your vehicle, making sure that everything is where it needs to be on your vehicle when you're towing is really important. You incur a lot of costs there. Food, the refrigerator is smaller in ours. So we're actually grocery shopping
like weekly.
Yeah. Versus like every 2 weeks that we're in sticks and bricks.
Especially because the refrigerator is a pain
to
deal with.
Yeah.
And trying to keep it, temperatures and stuff like that.
That happened to us too, at the Llano trip.
It did, yeah. So the refrigerator stopped working, and it was because we were not level, which we knew we weren't level, but we didn't know that it would have such a significant effect on the refrigerator. And we didn't really use the refrigerator that much while we were there because we went out, we were out like doing stuff. And so it was like, it was the second day before we realized like it wasn't working. And so we had to throw everything out. And replace all of it. So that's a huge thing.
Yep.
It can be for some people. Another thing is the rising cost. I mean, everybody's kind of getting into this lifestyle now. RV parks are getting more expensive. They're charging more, gas prices are going up. So you have to incur for that.
Propane.
Apparently there's a propane shortage, which I think there's one every year, it seems like. But and propane is getting more expensive as well. So those are things you have to consider. You'll pay a lot of propane during the winter, to keep our tanks full. Like we'll probably be replacing them every couple of weeks once we start running the heater. And it took, how much was it last year to fill up both of them? Do you remember how much it was?
It's like $14 for one, so like $28 for each.
So, but
$28 for both.
Yeah, but propane was cheaper last year.
Yeah, it was like $2.
Yeah, so now it's more expensive. So it'll probably cost a good bit more for that. So and then gas again, you have to fill up, especially if you're traveling a lot. Our truck gets about 10, maybe 11 gallons if we're like per mile if we're lucky when we're towing. So we're constantly have to fill up if we're moving around. And then, so in the RV parks, I wanted to talk about like the rising costs of RV parks are going up. A lot of RV parks are about $30 to $60, I found, like on average per night. So add that up and it can add up really quickly. Some of them charge per kid these days. It's like $5 or $10 extra like per kid that you have. And so, I mean, if you have a lot of kids, that can add up, you know, especially when you're wanting to stay somewhere for a longer term. You can easily pay more than you were paying for a mortgage staying in certain RV parks. Especially if you have kids. I mean, you want to be somewhere where there's amenities like playgrounds and pools and stuff like that. Those can get expensive. I don't think people realize how expensive they can be.
Yeah. So that's really the reality that we're pointing out. It like I said, it is possible if you have to go into it with the right conditions. Right. We were very fortunate again that we had built up equity in our home. We were able to eliminate a lot of our debt, so our monthly budget, like our expenses for the RV, the truck, you know, like things like that, they're gone. They're non-issues. But suppose if you have those things, like this could still be a pretty expensive lifestyle. Yeah. Right. You cannot just quit your job,
sell your house, buy a truck and buy an RV, and then have the payment for the truck, payment for the RV, and paying for places
insurance.
To stay.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yep. Yeah, it all adds up.
Yeah, so it'll add up. So they just know that you have to plan and budget. We mentioned this in one of our vehicles on the kind of the 5 steps to transition from sticks and bricks to full-time life. Securing income, being real with yourself, with your skill set, and how you're going to make money on the road, how much you're going to work. Don't think that, oh, I'm just going to
figure it out.
I'm going to live out there, or I'm going to hit it. I'm going to go viral on YouTube, and all of a sudden I don't have to have work anymore. Right. Like we were like, no, I'm not going to say I'm a YouTuber. Right. No, we're doing videos on YouTube, whatever happens with that, or on social media. Great. That's awesome. But that's not my primary source of income. Right. You have your job. You're able to switch to working remotely for the same company, hourly rate. You got to put in X amount of hours in order to get your money. I figured out another company, privatized what I was doing. Right. So we have jobs that we'll be doing on the road. Right. So again, just reality. You're not going to just quit your job, sell your house, buy an RV, and go live the life.
And then you have to do those jobs too. I mean, you have to balance like work, school,
and traveling.
If you have kids, you know, and traveling. So you have to work. You have to balance all of that stuff. It's not all fun and games like people make it out to be.
Yes. Yeah. Certainly. And then everyone, there's a huge, again, solutions. You could always boondock.
You could.
There's federal land out there that you could stay in for free. And that's going to be a huge part of our cost is staying somewhere. And we know that. We're planning for that. If you don't want to incur that cost, you want to keep your expenses low, you can boondock. But just know that with boondocking, there comes a lot more discomfort. With that freedom comes a lot more discomfort, right? You're going to have to get a Blue Boy or a tank, or you're going to get a macerator pump, maybe pump the stuff in the tank into the Blue Boy, then drive it somewhere to dump it and come back, right? So these are things you have to plan for and account for that are realities of expenses. You know, you can get around them, but it may require a little bit more work. Yeah. This one here is really, really important.
So you have to think about legal ambiguity, right? Because if you're constantly moving around, you still have to have a home base. Like you have to have a place to claim, right? Because you have driver's license, you know, registration, voting, taxes, things like that. Those are all things that you still have to deal with. So you have to have a home base. And so establishing a home base can be difficult for some people. There's lots of different clubs out there that I have found that are really convenient. Like Escapees is one of them, and that offers residency in a state. And so you have to have that, like I said, in order to get insurance. Like you can't say, well, I live in my RV full time and I move around. Like you have to have an address to give them. For your driver's license, you have to have an address, you know, especially when it comes time to renew. Like you have to give them something. You can't just say, well, I move around, I don't have an address. You have to give them an address. And then like voting and taxes, like you still have to pay your taxes every year. You have to have an address. You have to give them those things. So it can be difficult, right? Because if you live in another state that doesn't allow you to have a residency without living there, then you have to establish a residency in a state that will allow you to do it. With Escapees, it's South Dakota, Texas, and Florida. Those are the only 3 states that allow you to have a residency without actually living there. And so Escapees is a good club that helps you establish that residency, so to speak, that gives you an address that you can use for your taxes, for voting, for for license, for insurance and stuff like that. I've heard of people doing UPS mailboxes, because UPS will give you a street address to put on, your stuff. And so that, I think you can do that, but I don't think that it's legal when it comes to like taxes.
Like if
and
anyone
stuff like
really
that.
like looked into it.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, you can get away with it until
you get audited.
Right. Yeah. And so establishing that residency, you have to do it. You can't put that off, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
People do it, but you have to have that. And so
it's one thing. It's the pie in the sky, the rainbow side of it is like, man, I can just hook up my RV and I can go anywhere I want to go.
Right.
The reality side of that is like you are accountable to a state, to a nation, to an insurance company that requires certain logistical like things to be in place.
Right.
And so that is a reality you're going to have to worry about and deal with.
And it can be really expensive if you live in another state to register yourself into another state. That can be really expensive, because you have to register your vehicles, you have to register the RV, you have to change your driver's license, and stuff like that. So it can be really expensive if you live in, say, another state and you want to establish residency in Texas, for example. It can add up. Those costs can add up. So that's something you have to consider when doing that. And then the fact that you have to establish residency in one of these states. You want to find out what Texas involves, what South Dakota involves, and what Florida involves, because you may not agree with some of the stuff that goes on in those states. So you have to figure out whether or not that's something you want to do if you want to establish yourself as a resident of one of these states.
Because then whatever happens in that state, like you are held legally accountable to the laws and processes of that state. Even if you're not there physically, like your residency, you're in, like you were held accountable there.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of things to consider, like a lot of realities to, again, we kind of touched on it last episode, is like, we are figuring a lot of this stuff out. We are planning, we're dealing with issues as they come up, and we want to share our experiences, our knowledge with you, and hopefully you can take these into account, plan, say, oh, I need to do that, I don't need to do that, kind of just make these things easier for you. And I just think it would be a disservice to anyone who watches our videos or follows us or is part of our community, that they only hear all the good sides, the pros.
Right.
I hate to use pros and cons. Let's just say the ideal aspects of living in an RV, as opposed to the reality side of it.
Yes. There are things that you have to consider and you have to think about.
Yeah, and it's with, we said at the beginning, we opened with that because I just wanted y'all to make sure that you did not misunderstand our tone and our tenor through all of this. In spite of all these realities. Right. I said it to you earlier today, the summer of Texas, living in this thing. Today, the weather, coming out here and doing what we did today, just enjoying the morning and the way we did, made the entire summer worth it.
Yeah.
Right? For every con, every reality, there's 5 pros, there's 5 ideal situations that come together and work out that make this life so worth it.
Right.
No second thoughts, no regrets. And I hope you feel the same way too about your experience. I just also hope that you don't have blinders on, that you're seeing the full picture, and that you can get the most out of this life that you could possibly get. So hopefully you got something from this episode, and hopefully you enjoyed our conversation about the topics.
Hopefully.
And we will see you in our next episode.
So say we all.
So say we all. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.
We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our video channel and podcast. We've absolutely loved building connections with the RV community and anybody else that's interested in this lifestyle.
So if you'd like to connect with us, please follow us on Instagram and YouTube at So Say We Travel, or visit us at SoSayWeTravel.com.
See you down the road.